The Chinese Communist Party's leader, Xi Jinping, has now acquired a popular nickname, the Chief Accelerator, meaning the person who accelerates the demise of the CCP. When Xi became the fifth-generation leader of the Communist Party in 2012, no one could have predicted that 8 years later he would become the Chief Accelerator, given China's then economy and international influence. Xi Jinping's father, Xi Jinping, was the founding father of Communist China and a former vice premier of the State Council of China, which is why Xi is known as the second generation of Reds, a title given to the children of the original communist members. Before the Cultural Revolution, however, Xi's father reviewed a novel that was later condemned as anti-party, and he was thus made a member of the anti-party group. During the Cultural Revolution, he was brutally persecuted. As a teenager, Xi Jinping was also implicated and became a political underclass, once forced to wear a tall dunce hat so heavy that he had to hold it with 2 hands. Xi's mother was forced to watch from the stage, chanting, "Down with Xi Jinping." At the age of 15, Xi was sent to a poor rural village where he lived and worked for nearly 7 years. One of his sisters couldn't stand the persecution and committed suicide. After Xi's father was rehabilitated in 1978, he presided over the drafting of the 1982 Constitution. All references to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party were removed from the text, and the Constitution adhered to the principle of supremacy of the people, refusing to place political parties and individuals above the state and the people. His father also spearheaded the reform of the special economic zones in southern China's cities, Shenzhen. Xi's father also condemned the military crackdown on protesters during the June 4th Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. As a result, Xi's father was regarded as one of the few open-minded members of the Communist Party. The year 2012 marks the transition of power in the Communist Party's top leadership. Xi's biggest rival, Bo Xilai, who is also a second-generation politician and has gained the support of Jiang Zemin, the third-generation leader of the CCP, for following his various human rights persecution policies. During his 13 years in power, Jiang Zemin's henchmen were all over the national bureaucracy. Jiang supported the 1989 student massacre and received a subpoena from a U.S. federal court for initiating a campaign to persecute Falun Gong during his time in power. During the subsequent rule of Hu Jintao, a fourth-generation leader of the Communist Party, Jiang was the de facto power holder. On major occasions, the public saw the retired Jiang precede the ruling Hu. Hu did not belong to the second generation of the Reds and was therefore seen by the second generation as an employee of the Reds rather than their boss. Jiang, on the other hand, tries to pretend his family is part of the second generation of the Reds. The embattled fourth-generation leader Hu helped Xi Jinping, who with the support of some of the second-generation Reds, eventually came to power in 2012 and put Bo Xilai behind bars. In that year, his close aide in the second generation, Wang Qishan, also entered the heart of China's power. The period from 2012 to 2017 was the first 5 years of Xi's rule. The world is watching to see if Xi would follow his open-minded father and lead China towards democracy. Compared to Hu was not a second-generation Red, Xi clearly had more support, which meant more power to manipulate. It was a period when Xi never quoted from Marx books in public, but often quoted from traditional Chinese culture. During that period, Xi chose to visit South Korea rather than North Korea. His aide, Wang Qishan, led a massive campaign against corruption in the national bureaucracy that uncovered a large number of corrupt officials, including, of course, a large number of Jiang Zemin's followers. Both Xi Jinping and Wang Qishan have gained high prestige in their campaigns against corruption. The Umbrella Movement broke out in Hong Kong in 2014, largely initiated by students fighting for the right to genuine universal suffrage and more transparency in elections. Hong Kong was under the control of Jiang faction officials, and media reports suggested that the Jiang faction had planned to make Hong Kong a second Tiananmen Square in 1989. However, Xi Jinping managed to keep the situation under control, and no blood was shed. At that time, many Chinese pinned their hopes on Xi, hoping that he would achieve true fame if China achieved a drastic political reform toward democracy.
社会付出的代价也最少，人民也最少受苦，他自己和他的家庭也能够安保平安。他自己想清楚了，把中国引入 民主政体引入世界民主大潮，这是最好的形式。
Luo Yu served as chief of the Air Force Equipment Division of the People's Liberation Army General Staff Department at the rank of colonel, and went into exile overseas in 1989 for opposing the June 4th massacre. Luo Yu's father, Luo Ruiqing, was the first minister of public security in Red China. His father suffered severe persecution during the Cultural Revolution, jumping from a building and breaking his leg. The Luo family and the Xi family were in frequent contact. Similarly, the world has expectations of Xi Jinping.
The relationship developed by President Xi and myself, I think, is outstanding. We look forward to being together many times in the future. And I believe lots of very potentially bad problems will be going away.
The turning point occurred in 2017. A major CCP meeting in 2017.
不能生搬硬套外国政治制度模式.
Wang Qishan's name disappeared from the list of 7 top leadership groups. An official belonging to the Jiang faction, Wang Huning, made the list and became the head of the CCP's propaganda department. In the CCP's ruling philosophy, the weight of the pen is equal to the barrel of a gun. In 2018, China's National People's Congress passed a resolution amending the constitution to remove the requirement that a chairman may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. This means that Xi Jinping could be re-elected for life. One possibility, as speculated, is that Xi abandoned his close aide Wang Qishan and allowed the addition of Jiang faction officials to the top leadership in exchange for a lifetime re-election. Also in 2017, after that major meeting, Xi led his new top leadership team to communist revolutionary addresses in several cities, declaring that he was ready to sacrifice everything for the party and the people and will never betray the party. Perhaps Xi believed that the communist system would guarantee his longevity in power, or perhaps he never realized that he would gain real glory if China were to achieve political reform. Since then, Xi's good fortune seems to have vanished, and he has been facing unprecedented difficulties. Instead of having good officials around him, Xi's close associates were often giving him trouble. One of his cronies, Kai Qi, massively expelled the so-called low-class population in the dead of winter in late 2018. Millions of migrant workers, including young children, had their families driven out of their homes and onto the streets in Beijing in the winter.
限制你3天给我搬，不搬就把你赶到外边去，东西给你砸了，门给你转了。你说这个人有发火了吗？我看习近平也不是个好玩意儿了，知道吗？我们老百姓有没有发言权？那你看那个，昨晚上孩子100升发高烧，你说咋办？
This infuriated many Chinese people. It never occurred to the mayor that his leader, Xi Jinping, could be called a lowlife even in the 1960s and the 1970s. Propaganda officials sent by the Jiang faction began touting Xi in major media outlets in a manner reminiscent of the Cultural Revolution. This created a sense of disgust among the people who lived through that era. This approach was described by the public and even by the authorities as seemingly high-grade red, but in fact, it was a low-grade smear. The various decisions made by Xi Jinping during this period are also perplexing. In May 2019, China suddenly backtracked and reversed a 150-page draft trade agreement it had previously reached. Beginning in June 2019, Hong Kong experienced severe turmoil as the Chinese government reversed international agreements and passed the Hong Kong National Security Law, further suppressing democracy and freedom for the people of Hong Kong. The Chinese Communist Party has chosen to cover up information about the coronavirus that began in China in late 2019, allowing the virus to spread around the world. In response to international pressure, the Xi Jinping administration's diplomats have launched a wolf warrior diplomacy, sending military aircraft and warships to the Taiwan Strait, South China, and East China Seas in a steady show of force. China also got into the largest border conflict with India in decades.
We have to keep in mind that the CCP regime is a Marxist-Leninist regime. General Secretary Xi Jinping is a true believer in a bankrupt totalitarian ideology. It's this ideology that informs his decades-long desire for global hegemony of Chinese communism.
Internally, Xi Jinping has tightened his centralization of power and control over the minds of the people, while intensifying his crackdown on dissidents, causing China's political regression to continue. On September 22nd this year, a second generation of the Red CCP officials and Chinese property tycoon was sentenced to 18 years in prison for his criticism of Xi Jinping, shocking the country and abroad. Usually, these Red generations are privileged and rarely get punished for their comments. The property tycoon is close to Wang Qishan, a former close aide to Xi Jinping. Such behavior could even put Xi at risk of losing the support of the second generation, which was once the most important foundation of his power.
中国真的要走向现代民主政治，我可以讲8个字。第一个2个字就是去习。你首先要请习下去，然后打破目前的这个僵局。就我这样的人是有原罪的。曾经也有人问我，说红二代究竟是要放弃特权还是放弃政权？那么我不敢说是所有的红二代都是一个想法，这群人不是铁板一块的。有相当一批的红二代认为，就是我们过去的特权说明中国共产党人父辈的这种目标并没有真正实现，他仍然是在夺取政权和建立一个等级特权的一个社会，所以这不是我们父母当初就是跟着共产党去搞那个暴力革命吧，这个打仗流血牺牲，这不是父母自己真正的一个追求目标，他是跟当初父母参加这个中国共产党的时候初衷是完全违背的。
Beginning in 2015, Luo Yu began writing open letters to Xi, published in the Hong Kong media Apple Daily, urging Xi to follow the path of democratization, amounting to 31 letters in total. A reporter once asked Luo Yu, "Can Xi read these letters?" Luo replied, "He can see it." After his 31st letter in September 2018, Luo did not continue.
China condemned my travel ban on their country, even as they canceled domestic flights and locked citizens in their homes. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
The U.S. is leading allies into action. On October 2nd, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, issued policy guidelines emphasizing that any member or associate of a Communist Party is generally ineligible for immigration to the U.S. The USCIS also prohibits immigration by members or associates of other totalitarian parties. On September 24th, it was revealed that rule.The, the online news agency of exiled Chinese tycoon Guo Wengui, that Jiang sent 3 hard drives to the U.S. Department of Justice, including a breakdown of the funds and real estate stashed overseas by Xi Jinping and Wang Qishan. It was also revealed that Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was in an obscene video, and how he got the $4.5 billion Kazakhstan-Ukraine natural gas pipeline contract with the Chinese government. As you can see, even Xi's opponents, the Communist Party's powerful elite, know that the demise of the Communist Party is a matter of time, perhaps soon. They fantasize about pushing Xi Jinping out of office, or even becoming one of the men who took credit for destroying the Communist Party, and looking for a new way to regain power and influence. The current Xi is still on the path of acceleration. His youth was enough to make him realize the evils of communism, and the power he wielded gave him the opportunity to change the course of the country. But there is no denying that Xi Jinping is facing the greatest temptation in the world, the temptation of communism. The first words of the Communist Manifesto are, "A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism." When people state that they are ready to sacrifice everything for the party, does this specter have the opportunity to make a deal with their soul? And thus, are they bound to the fate of this specter?